Hey, this is Dave Pryor. Welcome to Leading Agile Sound Notes. So, Mike Cottmeyer is taking time out of his pre vacation preparation to let me incite him with questions that will probably result in a lot of expletives. So, Mike,
It,
thank you for taking time out.
yeah, we had a little prep call on this, and it was energetic. I was feeling indignant over some things, but it's good to be back, Dave. Always nice to talk to you, man.
Thank you for being here. So,
Yeah, sure.
the thing that I brought up, I said I wanted to talk about metrics. And the thing that I
Yeah,
wanted to talk about was the more that I learn about Kanban, the more that I study the Kanban metrics, because it is something
yeah,
I've become like a student of, the more I'm like, why the hell is anybody in Scrum even looking at velocity or thinking that that gives you any sense of predictability? Because the
right.
only way you're ever going to actually get that is if you track cycle time.
Yeah.
And you went off.
Well, it wasn't that I went off, right? It's like everybody wants to reject things that they don't actually um, apply appropriately.
Okay.
So I'll give you a little bit of backstory. So when I first got introduced to the whole no estimates thing on Twitter or something like that,
On
I
Twitter.
started digging into it. At the time, this was a long time ago. I wasn't even all that familiar with Kanban at the time. Didn't fully understand what was going on. I'd been familiar with David Anderson's work around theory of constraints and things like that. So in general, kind of I knew, and I was like, well, so to me, the whole premise behind no estimates was that you basically just in effect run just what you're saying, you just run things through a Kanban and you measure cycle time. But if there's a tremendous amount of variation in the size of the requirements, like lots of things are really big and
Yeah.
then random things are really small, it's like is the average cycle time like a super useful metric? Like maybe, but it's like you could have a big batch of big things and then followed by a big batch of small things, and how would you
Right.
know? So one of the things I started unpacking was with the idea that if you're going to do no estimates and you're just going to do flow and you're just going to rely on cycle time,
Hmm.
what you're fundamentally assuming is that the things that you've broken down are relatively similarly sized,
Hmm.
right? Everything's like a size of a one or a two or a three, if we're going to use like a Fibonacci kind of a thing.
Sure.
And so in the presence of similarly sized backlog items, I would make the argument that you have fundamentally estimated,
Okay.
right? That's really it at the end of the day, right? So it to me, it's like a fakey thing. So for no estimates, cycle time based things to work, everything needs to be relatively the same size.
Okay. So,
And then I'm just kind of like, well, if you're going to do that, you're estimating anyway. So it's like, what does it matter?
all right. So I want to, for anybody who's not familiar with this, if you go to
Okay.
Twitter, type hashtag no estimates, you're going to see a long stream of conversation. And the thing that really made me feel a great need to take a failure bow when we had this pre-call yesterday was um, I have even interviewed Woody Zool about no estimates,
Mm-hmm.
and I never connected no estimates with tracking cycle time. I just thought it was like people just, it's just stupid. We suck at estimating, so don't bother. Just work, right? It's
Well,
all about outcomes, and they wave their hands like jazz hands. And I feel kind of silly for the fact that I never connected those two things. But
well, so kind of here's the deal, right? So as you know, Dave, we have a small dev team here. We do some internal product development. We do a little bit of product development on some side things. So I have like
yep,
maybe 5 or 6 developers that work for me. And so when we're building internal products,
yeah,
like we don't estimate either, right? Because I don't really care when something is in market. It's like I trust my team. We're doing really good work. We're building the most valuable things we can possibly build, and we're moving the ball at a rate that I'm comfortable. But here's the thing: like I'm paying the bills.
right. And
I
that's
get
a
to
unique
decide what I'm happy
situation.
with.
You're not a
Yeah,
startup
it's a
just
unique
about to go
situation, right?
under.
So I'm building a product for our teams internally and for our clients, and I don't make any commitments to the clients. I don't. The team doesn't have to make
You
any
have that
commitments to
freedom.
me. But right now, I've got that team redirected on, I don't want to say it's an external product, but it's not like we're doing it for somebody else. We're still doing it for ourselves, but it has non-leading agile clients that are going to run through it.
Okay.
And now we're like in the process where we have a sales pipeline that we're running and we're making and meeting commitments. And so the level of precision and having some sense for when we're going to be done with
Hmm.
a particular set of features so we know when we go sell them, that becomes more important. Now, we're not doing stupid things. Like, we're not making really hard date commitments to anybody. We're
Right.
giving, ranges and managing expectations, and we're being super reasonable. But now, because we have non-leading agile people that are relying on this product,
Hmm.
now we have to have
There's
some
more at
idea. And
risk.
right, when
Yeah.
you get into the corporate world, and you actually have trade shows you have to hit, or you have product launches that you have to meet, like,
Or investors. Yeah.
you have to have some idea of where you're going to be, like, where you're going to be and when.
Okay.
And
So
so yeah, go ahead.
I want to go back to the similar size thing in this
Hmm.
kind of vein thinking.
Yeah,
If I can get a team to get everything, like when I've interviewed Ron and Chet talks about everything's got to be a one. If I can get everything to a one,
sure.
and you're saying that you are in effect estimating, I
You're
guess what
estimating if
what
you're doing
I'm
that.
thinking is if you're developing the skill to break down these things into vertical slices that are all ones,
Sure.
estimation isn't even a question. It doesn't matter anymore.
Well,
It's irrelevant.
but you fundamentally are estimating, right?
Okay.
And this is where I get, so this is what I think's jacked up about the conversation around story points and planning poker and things like that. So, I got introduced to all that stuff, like a lot of us, through Mike Cohn, right? And
Hmm.
so agile estimating and planning, and so I cut my teeth on those techniques. And so, to me, like, what I always taught was, like, the value behind Fibonacci and or going through the planning poker exercise is that, everybody throws their card. If everybody converges on the same thing, okay, cool, right? But if somebody has a 1 and somebody does a 5 and everybody else is a 3, you do something like, the lowest person gets to say why they think it's low, and the highest person gets to say why they think it's high. And then we have this really rich conversation, and then we revote. And, kind of pain in the ass, but it's like, what causes that to be effective is the conversation and the
Right.
shared understanding that it creates. Right? Is it perfect? Of course it's not perfect, right? We're agilists, right? At the end of the day, we understand that a story is independent, negotiable, valuable, estimatable, small, and testable, right?
Right.
So if it's negotiable, right? So we get a rough idea of what it is, and then we bring it into sprint planning or something, and we talk about it, and we have conversations, and we decide how to make it fit. Like, to
Okay.
me, that's what all this stuff was about. It's just a tool for creating shared understanding.
Totally agree with you.
You get into now you get into, like, how the teams operate with the rest of the world, and I think fundamentally, the problem in organizations is, I think there's a class of things that are relatively knowable, where it
Okay.
makes perfect sense to do decomposition and creating similarly sized stories, or
Right.
playing planning poker and doing story points, all those things. I think there's like a class thing that's super reasonable.
Okay.
There is a class of things where it is absolutely experimental, and it's really, really high risk. And I've coached a lot of teams that are basically trying to invent math. They're trying
Okay.
to invent techniques that never existed.
Right.
And where I think sometimes that this conversation gets into is, we're trying to estimate things that are largely unestimatable, and we're trying to deliver in a code base that's really poorly architected and full of technical debt and defects.
Hmm.
And so sometimes you get into this funny world where there's a class of things that are estimatable, and then there's a class of things that are probably not estimatable. And sometimes you have to think about that problem differently, because the business is trying to bring something to market with a degree of certainty
Yeah.
that is just inherently
Yeah.
uncertain. And then you don't have, now we're not having an estimation conversation. We're having a risk management conversation. We're having a, how do we bring high risk things to market?
Right.
How do we manage our customer expectations when we're doing high risk things?
But you understand that.
I do.
And I guess I feel like it's almost like they should have to sign a contract that says all the estimates are wrong and that's okay. All the plans are wrong and that's okay.
Well,
Because
okay,
they want that certainty. They need that security.
well, okay. So I'm going to play devil's advocate. I'm going to go against my thing. So if all plans are wrong, all estimates are wrong, then everybody signs off. Well, then at that point, like, why estimate at all?
Because
Right?
it's about the conversation. It's all about
The
having
way
that
that
discussion.
I've always thought, and this is the way I think about project planning, right, is that any estimate, any backlog, any Gantt chart, any project plan is like a map of the terrain. It's not the
Mhm.
terrain. it's a map of the terrain, right? So it kind of gets us close. And then like what we have to do is we have to inspect and adapt. We have to make good decisions. We have to negotiate scope. We have to negotiate implementation
Yeah.
because it's not acceptable to be late. Like everything in Agile, this is like from the earliest DSDM graphics that I got exposed to 20 years ago, where it's like, the traditional project management, time, cost, and scope, pick two, but one has to float. In
Right.
practice, companies want to fix all three and believe that they have certainty.
Right.
Right? What Agile is largely about, it's about fixing time and cost, and it's about varying scope.
Right.
And so what we do is we estimate to create shared understanding. We estimate to rough in a scope, and then we negotiate scope and implementation and all those things in real time to converge on maximizing value within time and cost constraints.
Yeah.
Like that's how it's supposed to work. Right. The problem is that we don't have good words for it a lot of times. And so, we have leadership or management that's trying to fix all three of the constraints.
Right.
We have agilists that are trying to fix two and float the third. But a lot of times we're talking past each other because in reality, like the business is trying to get something into market so they can make money.
Yeah.
And they're spending money on a dev team to get this revenue producing outcome. And then on the other side, you have developers that are dealing with a tremendous amount of risk and uncertainty, and they don't often know exactly what it's going to take. Like the product that I'm building with an external stakeholder, like it's not within our domain expertise. We've never done it before. So the team is stepping into it. And so in the early stages, we left it really fast and loose. And we just were like, okay, we're just going to get in and just see what this is all about.
Right.
And so we had some rough high-level epics. We had some rough interaction diagrams. We were trying to learn. We're experimenting in this space. So it's cool. So super open-ended. Like if you think about like in the early RUP days, we're basically doing like inception and elaboration.
Okay.
Right. We're trying to validate if there's a problem we can solve. We're trying to get the rough parts of the architecture, lots of risk, lots of uncertainty. Don't know if this thing's going to work. So I'm literally me betting dollars to see if there's something here.
But I think there's a third. I want to argue that there's a third group, and I think that they're a group that you probably maybe you don't, just because of the work that you do and where you are, you don't bang into them as often as I do.
Okay.
Those are the people that think you can't do Agile on projects with fixed scope and fixed costs. Those are the people that like there's just this misunderstanding of the whole thing, and those people get to the management level and want to do this stuff, and so it's like a misunderstanding that you can't resolve.
Well, isn't it fair to say, like, I get there's a class of human beings, there's a class of managers that want to believe you can get to fixed time, fixed cost, fixed scope.
Yeah.
You can't. I mean, that's project management physics. You can't.
I know, but there's so many parallels.
I mean, what you could do, right? What you can do, like if you were the person who always comes to mind is like Glenn Alleman. Like I think he's a really pragmatic. He runs large military programs. I haven't really followed much of his stuff in a long time, but I used to read his blog all the time. And if you're doing like really good project management, Monte Carlo simulations, earned value, all kinds of things, like everything's a range, right? And you can model projects based upon ranges and likelihoods, and like a mature leader would basically say, okay, the delivery is within a certain range. Mm-hmm. And then you would try to get delivery to happen within that range. Yeah. What we do on the software side a lot is we go fixed time, fixed cost, fixed scope. Nothing can vary. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's just immature project management. So I get we want that to be, but it's a little bit like it's why I want to start swearing when I talk about this, right? It's like the I want a pony syndrome. Well, I want it to be fixed time, fixed cost, fixed scope. And then you start to get into this conversation about, okay, so are the requirements fixed and knowable? Do we understand the solution with enough detail? Do we understand the estimates enough or the product enough to be able to estimate? Do we understand the technical debt and the architecture of the solution? Do we understand the human beings that are going to be applied? Do we understand what's going to go on in their personal lives? Like, I mean, there's so much risk and uncertainty in any project. Like it's naive. It's just naive
It's
to believe
naive, but it
that they
doesn't
fall
get them
free.
to stop demanding the pony. I guess
Well,
that's the
so
thing.
okay, so this is what we have to do. This is where I get energetic again. It's like what we have to do is like we have to stop lying to people because now we're in a situation where there's a power dynamic. Well, you have my
Yeah.
boss, like literally. I mean literally, and this has gotten me in trouble in companies. But it's like I sat down with a VP one time, and we had come up with a reasonably good project plan. And we were doing some agile stuff, but we were still Gantt charts and things like that. So we created this project plan and we felt like we understood the scope. We felt like we had reasonable estimates,
Mm-hmm.
and we felt like the people that we could apply to it would do in a reasonable timeline.
Yeah.
And the VP pulls me in. He goes, I need to take 2 months out of the project plan. Can we do it? And I went, well, okay, so let me tell you how I built this plan. So this is the scope as I understand it. Can we take any scope out? And he's like, no, we can't take any scope out. And we said, okay, well, so these are the estimates that the team gave us. Do we want to assume the estimates are inflated? No, we want to trust the team's estimates. Okay, cool. So do we have more people to apply to the plan? No, we only have the team of 6 or 8. And I'm like, well, then
No.
no, you can't move it up 2 months.
Yeah.
And it's like everybody's scared to tell the truth. And so what you have to do is you have to sit in the truth. And the truth is that things work a certain way. And it's like, unless you have perfect knowledge of the requirements, perfect knowledge of the system and the estimate it's going to take to build, and you have perfect knowledge that people are going to do it
Yeah.
to calculate a time frame, then you have to deal with risk and uncertainty. You have to. That's the way grown-ups. So somebody said, I want to say it was like DeMarco or somebody. I might be getting the quote wrong, but it's like risk management is project management for grown-ups. It's like if you basically sit there as a manager and say, I want fixed time, fixed cost, fixed scope, and
Yeah.
you have to give it to me. You're like a little kid. And I apologize to all the people I'm potentially disrespecting in advance, but it's like you're a little kid screaming, I want a pony, I want a pony, I want a pony. It's
Right.
like you're not getting a pony. Like it doesn't work that way.
I
And if you demand that from your team, they're going to lie to you, and they're going to tell you that they'll do it because they don't have any other choice to keep their jobs. So they
exactly.
lie to you. I actually told that to a senior vice president of product one time. I'm like, the pressure you're putting on these teams, they are lying to you. They're lying to you. You're going to your client and you're lying to them. And everybody knows they're lying. So what you have to do is you have to create an environment where you can stabilize the throughput, stabilize the velocity, learn how to make trade-offs. And it's going to take a little bit to get that. She said, how long? I'm like, 3 months. And she goes, just shoot me. Because she's under so much pressure to say
Yeah.
what the organization can
Well,
do, but they haven't built an organization that can make and meet commitments.
I think that's the thing, and this is an issue that extends beyond just agile. But there are a lot of people who you can show up with your it's physics, and they're going to go, no, the Earth is flat, Mike, and you're going to go, no, I can prove to you that it's not, and they're going to go, yeah, that's fake. So
Yeah,
they're going to
so
keep
cool, right?
demanding it, and they're going to get
and
lied
and
to.
ultimately they'll get fired because they're not going to be able to lead that organization to any kind of success.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, right? So there have been clients that I've worked with, especially in the early days when I was more of a solo entrepreneur, right? There are clients where you basically look, you tell them the truth. I've actually asked a room full of leaders, is it better here to say yes and to fail, or to say no, but this is what I can do and when I can do it? And I've literally had people tell me it is our culture to say yes and fail, and you
Yeah.
cannot do anything other than say yes and fail.
So
Okay,
okay, so if
then say
it's
yes and fail, right? If that's what's safer for you in your job, then do that if that's what you need to do.
I want to shift it a little bit. If that's the kind of company, because I do believe you're right, and there's
For
tons of
sure, there are
companies
companies
out
like
there
that.
like that.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
if I'm somebody who works at a company like that, like I'm always hesitant to say to somebody, you should quit your job. But I meet a lot of people in class. I'm like, you should quit your job. Like it's not
Well,
going to work. You're not going to get what you want. You're going to have to go somewhere else. But that puts people at risk too. I mean,
well, man, it's like it's tough, right? I mean, it's like as a leader who runs a company now, like I have empathy for the fact that there are business things that kind of must be true.
Hmm.
You must be profitable. You must sell deals. You must keep people off the bench. You must do all these things, right? And the pressure to do that is just
Intense.
insane,
Yeah.
right? It's insane, right? So these leaders, they're not, I don't think they're trying to be bad people. They're just under so much pressure. They don't understand the physics of it. And so they're just, all they're doing is rolling that pressure downhill.
Yeah. And that's going to cause people to not
As
integrate or
a,
dysfunction.
you know, there was something. It's been a long time since I've read a PMBOK. I think the last PMBOK I read was 15 years ago. It was like version 3 or something like
The
that.
blue one.
And there's like a code of ethics
Yes,
in
there
the
is.
front of that book, right? And I don't remember exactly what's in it, but it's somehow it's like tell the truth, like tell the truth. And as a professional project manager who is a PMP and
Hmm.
is operating against the code of conduct, right? You're ethically obligated to tell the truth.
But they also
And
give you an
so,
ocean of tools you can use to hide the truth
true, right? But you can also use
and
those
bend
tools
the
to tell
truth.
the truth, right?
Yeah.
So if you choose to lie by using the tool, I mean, you know, so again, it's like at some point in time, you have to appeal to professionalism, you have to appeal to integrity. And you know, so if you are in a situation where the values of the organization that you're working in or the integrity threshold of the organization that you're working in does not coincide with your values and beliefs, like, yeah, you're going to compromise your integrity to work there. You know, the conversation you and I always get into, and I feel for you running CSM classes all the time, right?
I
And
love
the
them.
environments that people, oh, and I, yeah, well, I know you love it and you're gifted at it, right? You're brilliant at it. But like those questions, they're impossible questions. They're just impossible questions, right? And so it's like how do I get people to do agile that are low integrity and want to fix the triple constraints and
You
just want me to
don't.
say yes to everything? You don't,
Yeah, I think
right?
for me, it's like, what world do you want to live in? Do you want to live in that world where you keep pretending the Earth is flat, or do you want to be a little more realistic about
Yeah,
atmosphere and light and
it's like
gravity?
so this is like my, you know, I remember back 15 years ago or something, there's a lot of articles on PMI's website before they did the ACP and started acquiring agile companies and stuff like
Hmm.
that, where they're like people would post articles like, is your company right for agile? And almost always the answer to the question was no,
Yeah, of course
right?
it is.
And so in your existing company,
Right.
there it's you're probably best cut out for waterfall. But waterfall is not, I mean, it's funny even saying waterfall. It feels like such a boogeyman, almost like a straw man thing. Like I don't know that anybody's doing waterfall. Most of the time
No,
people
they
are
are.
doing, well, I know, but I think in practice they're doing just ad hoc, whatever, right?
Yeah,
Kind of a thing. But
sloppy
let's say
waterfall.
waterfall. There's people out there doing waterfall. So is your company built for agile? No. But you're not going to get what you need from doing waterfall. Big batches are dead, right? There's
Hmm.
no world in which big batch, late risk management, late testing, late deployment is the way to go. No world where that's the way to go, in my opinion. So the question is you almost have to be agile in today's. You have to do incremental and iterative development. You have to mitigate risk as you go. You have to test as you go. You have to deploy and get feedback as you go. You almost have to be competitive. And so in that world, you have to ask yourself is what conditions must I create so that I can operate with greater agility?
Yeah.
And that's the question that we set out to try to solve. And so it's like I never had interest in answering impossible questions. How do I do Scrum if I don't have a product owner? The answer is you don't,
Okay.
right? How do I do Scrum if I don't have a complete cross-functional team? You don't. How do I do safe if I can't encapsulate a value stream? You don't. How do I
Okay.
create safe if I can't get everybody in the room to do big room planning? You don't. You just don't,
Okay. So I want to
right?
change the question a little bit.
I told you I was going to be. At least I'm not swearing.
No,
I'm
I'm waiting
energetic.
for it.
Okay.
I'm all
No,
ready to
no.
go, man.
It's my
Um,
professionalism overrides my desire to swear,
so
but it
what
didn't
condition?
override my desire to put on a shirt with a collar. So you
What
know,
condition should I create? But going back to the metrics topic, though,
yeah.
is there like a question that people can ask that helps them figure out what metrics they should be focusing on? Because I feel like for me, like the whole thing is rooted in people are staring at the wrong thing, and and,
Well,
and
well, so
they
at
don't
the
know
end
what
of the
else to
day,
look at.
right? So at the end of the day, like I'm not on the ground coaching, and my teams have done some miraculous things with metrics,
Hmm.
and so I tend to think like when I'm in the transformation space, I think of metrics on three levels. I think about are we executing against the plan we put in place? So there's like progress metrics, and then there's like capability metrics, like are we improving our ability to estimate or to plan or to make and meet commitments, things like that. And then the third one, most important one, is am I getting the business results? Am I creating more products my customers want that they're willing to sell?
Okay.
So progress against plan is a leading indicator for performance. Performance a leading indicator against business results. And so there's lots of things that you can measure. From an execution perspective, what I generally care about, it's all around throughput and however you want to measure throughput. So if it's
Okay.
if it's if it's a Kanban team, then it's almost always around like cycle time, lead time, tack time, because what you want in a Kanban system is you want continuous flow and you want like stability, right? You want the flow through the system to be
And
an
visibility
indicator
into what you're
for
seeing.
when you're going to get through the backlog.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to,
Okay.
right? Or how long it's going to take to handle an interrupt, something like that.
Okay.
If it's a Scrum team, it's some version of stable velocity, right?
Okay.
I want to be able to do the same number of similarly sized features every or user stories every sprint. Or if I'm doing variably sized features or stories, I want to be able to have stable velocity.
Okay.
Right? So stable velocity, stable throughput. Almost always, like at a program or product or portfolio level, you're looking for some sort of stable throughput indicator.
Okay.
Or maybe it's can I deliver against a release scope, right? Some form or fashion, it always comes back to that. It
So
always comes back to can you predictably make and meet commitments? Can you deliver with high quality? That kind of
well,
thing. That's the
okay.
core of it.
So I want to check on something here. I
Okay.
feel like when people think about metrics, they want to know like when am I going to deliver? And the questions that you just asked to me all point at I want to understand the system. So maybe I can't see when I'm going to deliver, but if I'm looking at cycle time, I'm understanding where things are getting jacked up. If I'm looking at
I would
velocity, I'm
suggest,
seeing where things are breaking
well,
down.
so that's true, right? So in a Kanban system, you can use blocked work, things that are stuck as an
Sure.
indicator of system performance, right? You can use flow as an indicator of system performance. But I will tell you, I mean, there's a reason on our website that we listed the four number one things that people ask me about. It's like predictability, quality, early return on investment, cost savings.
Okay.
I added later on innovation and product fit, right? There's some pressure, like sometimes we'll get into like net promoter score, employee satisfaction, sometimes there's some culture indicators, things like that.
Right.
But almost always businesses want to know when you're going to be done, what am I going to get for my money? Period. Right? Because it's like we're making investments of dollars.
Yeah.
We make investments of dollars to get a return. You don't have infinite money to solve the problem. You don't have infinite time to solve the problem.
Right.
So on some level, we have to get good at making and meeting commitments. Now, again, where that gets abused is the fixed time, fixed costs, fixed scope managers that are playing the I want a pony game, right?
Okay.
That's what gives all this a bad name. If we can use estimates and planning and throughput indicators to give us a rough idea of when we think we're going to be done, and then we reasonably negotiate scope, the scope of the user story, the scope of the feature, the scope of the epic. Sometimes we take epics out, sometimes we take features out, sometimes we take user stories out. Sometimes we negotiate the implementation details of epics, features, and user stories. But as long as we can negotiate the scope to deliver within time and cost constraints, the act of estimating just gets us in the ballpark. It allows us to rough it in so that we can negotiate in the small to maximize value.
Okay.
And again, like risk management is project management for adults. It's like if we don't understand and accept that there is inherently uncertainty in the development process, if just nothing else, the presence of humans in the system is going to introduce risk and uncertainty. It's going to, right? People not getting along can slow your project down. People getting sick cannot slow your project. Even if you had perfect requirements and perfect estimates, the human beings are inherently fallible. And so if we're not dealing with the reality of risk and uncertainty, then we're not managing projects. We're just hoping and we're praying and we're lying to people.
But we really want the pony, Mike.
But we really want a pony. I get it. Like ponies are really cool. I want a pony too, right?
This is awesome.
Yeah. It's so like this is what I just feel like. And so sometimes, it's interesting, being on podcasts, you and I have been doing this for a long time.
Hmm.
I've been producing content and talks for a long time. There's a part of me that's just exhausted writing. And I understand like why guys that were writing, gals that were writing 10, 15 years ago just stopped, because it's like you're saying the same things over and over. Because it's like at some point in time, it's like, it's a little bit like, getting to our constant weight loss thing. It's like everybody wants to be thin and fit, but who wants to exercise and eat right?
Yeah.
The hard answer is you will not be thin and fit. You will not be healthy unless you exercise and eat right. You just won't be. There is no silver bullet. There is no pill that's sustainable. There just isn't. Right. And people try to, you can get, you can take weight loss, you can take diet pills, and you can do weight loss surgery, and you can do all these things. But at the end of the day, if you don't change your habits,
You don't change the system,
none of that
nothing's
stuff
going
is
to change.
sustainable, right?
Yeah.
None of that stuff is sustainable. And you will never get better unless you can deal with the reality.
All right.
And again,
Well,
sometimes that gets all the way up to the top, and you have to, sometimes there are some things that you have to do in order to be able to change the fundamental
yeah,
ecosystem.
sacrifices you
Yeah.
have to make. All
Okay,
right.
cool.
So thank you. And I want to
You're welcome.
now shift gears
Okay, what are we
completely.
shifting to?
So this is somewhat tied to this, but yesterday
Okay.
when we did the other interview, we
Yeah.
started talking about creativity. At
Yeah,
the end of
we're
it,
doing back-to-back podcasts. They won't get
yeah,
released back-to-back, but we did
no,
2 days in a row. That's pretty cool. It's the first time
it
ever.
is cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Our velocity is really good. Um, we talked about duality, and we were talking
Yeah.
about tension between different things, and I was just sort of hoping you could maybe kind of expand on that a little bit and talk about what you've learned about kind of maintaining this push pull thing with the work that you're doing, and your own ability to be creative.
Okay, so let me give you a little bit. So this has been like one of the things that's like very present in mind. This has been a very difficult year in business, right? 2022 is been an interesting economic climate to do consulting in, and so there's been a lot of stress in the system. But also for me personally, there's been a lot of growth and a lot of awesome stuff that goes on. So this idea of like duality has been like very present for me. So it's like there have been moments where like some really bone crushing stress, but some really awesome things are just coexisting like right in the same instant of time. And so this idea is interesting. Maybe another angle that's like very present is as we've grown and as we understand like what certain people are good at or gifted at. Sometimes you'll find that there's people who are more creative problem solvers, really high end solutioners,
Mm-hmm.
tend to be less structured and disciplined. And then there's people who tend to be really structured and disciplined, but they're not always your best like creatives and big picture thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's like a duality in a lot of environments between we need people that can really creatively solution partnered with people that are really disciplined and execution can actually get things done. It manifests a little bit in Scrum, right? The product owners oftentimes are like cathedral builders, right? They want to take over markets and add all this feature and all this capability and all this really cool stuff. But then at some point in time, the team actually has to execute it and make it work.
Mm-hmm.
So that was what was kind of in the space when we were talking about it. It's like this duality of and these tensions and these balances between um, free thinking, whatever's possible, and structured, disciplined execution.
Okay.
Really awesome things that are happening coinciding with really hard things that are happening. So I don't know. That
Okay.
was the space I was in. Is
Well,
that yeah,
how do you kind of sense and maintain the right amount of tension? I mean, like with running leading agile or with anybody who's trying to do
yeah,
transformation, you do have to have that sort of grinding a little bit for things to emerge, for the stuff to spark, right? How do you know when it's not too much on one side or the other? Because you're talking about pretty extreme
yeah,
highs and lows, right? So it can be
yeah, yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know that there's a clear answer to it. It's like maybe like a clue, right? I don't know that this is the answer, but it's like a clue. As I was at a conference that I go to every year, it's a really cool conference everybody wants to look at. It's called Dent,
okay.
DENT. Website's dentthefuture.com. And it's imagine like early days of like a TED talk kind of a thing, like really combinatorial creativity, a lot of really interesting speakers. You'll get academics and astronauts and entrepreneurs and just all kinds of really interesting people get up on stage and share stories and talk about stuff. And There's a lady, a researcher, I can't remember what university, I want to say Stanford, but it might not be Stanford. And she was talking about phases of learning in human beings, and like early stages when we're young and adolescents, and then when we become older adults, and then we become like grandparents and things. And talking about how like being young is like a period of like really high learning. It's a high experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we get older, we start to figure out we have to like exploit our learnings and like, get shelter and raise families and support our kids and things like that. And then we have a period of life after we're done with that where we're kind of almost like back into learning mode and transferring knowledge and such. And it was a really fascinating talk from this lady. And so maybe the answer to your question is when things are young and experimental,
Mm-hmm.
we have to make sure that we are creating enough space to try things and to learn with a lot of safety. But
Okay.
once we've centered on that, like once we've learned enough, then we have to put in more structure and control. So maybe there's like a level of awareness between like what stage of life we're at.
Sure.
It gets a little bit to what we're talking about with metrics. It's like
Yeah.
if we're doing something that's incredibly high risk, fraught with a ton of uncertainty, where we don't know the answer, probably not a good idea to go to our customers and say we're going to have that done by the end of the month, because we
Yeah.
don't know, right? We're experimentation. But once we figured out the math, once we figured out the core algorithm, and
Right.
now we're just adding user interface capabilities or reports or something like that, things we know how to do.
Yeah.
Now that's the time for making and meeting commitments.
So
So, yeah,
if it's transformation, then in the beginning it is just learning what's possible and seeing when we spin up those pilots how badly it ravages the thing we have in place, and then
well,
getting to a place where we can actually tune stuff up and get it to work well.
well, part of the challenges we have, and like when somebody calls us about a transformation, is they say, "Well, how long is this transformation going to take?" Like, I don't know, right? I don't know, right? So what we do is we try to bound it up front, and we'll say, okay, this is what the first 2 days are going to look like, and this is what we're going to discover, and this
Yeah.
is what's going to be the state of the business case and the plan and everything after 2 days, and then we're going to do a 6 to 8 week engagement, and then we're going to learn more, and then we're going to have a roadmap, and we'll get to a next level of certainty, and then we'll do a pilot, and we'll get to the next level of certainty, and then once we've gone through the discovery and the definition, we go through the pilot,
Mm-hmm.
then it's like we have a better understanding of what the character of the organization is, and we can get a better sense for how long the rest of it's going to go.
Yeah.
But to some degree, you have to be willing to invest in that early stage experimentation so that you can learn enough that you can start to make and meet commitments. And so I think there's a discipline to being able to leave something open. Like there's parts of Leading Agile's consulting model that are incredibly structured and incredibly
Right.
disciplined that we've been doing for 12 years that we can largely wash, rinse, and repeat.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things in not only what we know to do, but where we see things emerging, where there's opportunities to advance into business agility, enterprise agility, hardware agility, things that are not as well defined, where you can still solve those problems. You have the domain expertise, but they're not as repeatable
Yeah.
at this level of maturity. I don't know that they'll ever be more repeatable. I would think that they will be, but until you've done it enough, it's a little bit of a so what's interesting is when you're thinking about making investments in really high risk activities, like the dollars that you invest in the early stages to learn, you have to build that in, and you have to say, okay, these investments are really high risk and uncertain,
Yeah.
but if we win, the reward has to be really high. It's a little bit like venture capitalists, right? It's like, what do they say? Like 1 out of 100 angel funded companies will be successful.
Mm-hmm.
That's why a VC will get such a high percent out of an angel funded or an A
Because they're
round
taking
kind
so
of
much
investment,
risk. Yeah.
because that one win has to cover the other 99 losses.
Well,
And
also,
so,
okay.
yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking about, like, we talked about skiing before. You could
Yeah.
tell somebody I can teach you how to ski in like 3 days, but I can't teach you how to ski where you're dropping out of a helicopter and going straight down a mountain by yourself. I don't know how long that's going to take because
Yeah.
we don't
Like,
know when you're going
yes.
to get to that level of performance.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's probably something there. If I was going to try to build on that, like, I mean, I've put a lot of energy in learning how to ski over the last couple of years, and my kids, they're not the same place in life as me, and so they don't get to go out to Vail and hire instructors and maybe ski 5 weeks out of a year or something, right? They come
Right.
out once a year, and they're good enough to ski, right? They can do all the greens, and they can do some of the blues. They probably fall down more than I do, but they were on skis. They didn't learn to ski as kids, like they learned to ski as late teens, early 20s,
Okay.
and but they're competent skiers. They can do whatever. To become, to your point, really really proficient, like who knows, right? Who knows how long it's going to take? If they were able to invest the time that I've been able to invest, they probably would be way better than me right now. I'm an old guy, right? So I'm learning a little bit slower. I'm a little more
Yeah.
scared to fall than they are. I don't heal as fast as they do. Yeah. So, I mean, it's like there's just a lot of risk and uncertainty. So if you're going to invest in things that are really risky and uncertain,
Yeah.
then you got to make sure that return is high enough to justify the risk.
Okay.
And again, I've said this a bunch of times. It's like, risk management is project management for adults.
Yeah.
It's like you have to understand the risk profile of what you're investing in. You have
Yeah.
you have to, right? And you can't pretend things are certain when they're not. And so you have to be able to sit in that duality of,
Ooh.
gosh, I really need this to be certain, but it's
Damn. That
not.
was
So what are you going to do?
masterful. You
See, I
pulled
did.
it all
I just
together
pulled it
there.
right back together,
That was
man. Yeah.
badass.
Yeah. There you go,
All
man.
right. So now I
I
have.
will say that's actually something about, I appreciate how my brain works, is I can run a bunch of threads and
Yeah.
pull them all back to a point.
That was really good.
Yeah, man, if I ever get Alzheimer's, I'm screwed. So, yeah.
All right. Weird question time.
Okay, cool.
So I did an interview with Matthew Oates a few weeks ago, and he talked about these 3 albums that he has that he puts on when he's trying to focus on his work.
Okay.
And I'm wondering, is there music you listen to when you're trying to focus? And if so, what is it?
So if I'm trying to focus I'm kind of going through a shift. If you would have asked me like a year ago, like I tend to like really punchy rock music. I grew up on heavy metal. I like a lot of the 90s alternative stuff. Um, and so I like really aggressive music with beats and stuff. Well, I found that that's not necessarily the best thing for me to concentrate.
Yes.
And so, like, if I'm sitting in my office, more often than not, this is very specific, as I will put on a Pandora station that is seated with the 90s band Oasis. That's just
Okay.
what and that
So it's
seed
just enough, but
artist,
not too much.
it's just enough, right? It's not over the top. It's not super punchy. That creates a nice mix of relatively modern music that kind of is able. I enjoy the music, but it fades into the background easy for me.
Okay.
What I've been listening to a lot is like, I would almost say like meditation music, like almost kind of like new agey, like something that you might encounter in like a spa if you were
Yeah.
going to go get a massage or something like that.
Yeah.
So that kind of a thing is a little bit what's putting me into a good headspace nowadays.
Okay.
So yeah,
Cool. All right.
yeah,
Well, this is great. Well,
yeah.
thank
That
you,
was easy.
sir.
You're very welcome, man. Thanks for
I
having
hope
me
you
as
enjoy
always.
Are you going anywhere good?
Yeah, so we've been so all my kids are out of the house, right? 52, my last one's in college. It's pretty neat. And so we're empty nesters. And so my wife and I and 2 other couple friends of ours are, it's our second annual adult Disney trip. And so
Wow.
we're going to Orlando, flying out tomorrow, and we're going to spend 4 days in the park, 1 day at the pool. And it's like adult Disney, tequila tastings, awesome restaurants, high-end hotels. We're doing some back safari thing where they're feeding us and giving us like a back. So I mean, we'll do our share of Small World and roller
Yeah.
coasters
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But like you can reserve a seat for like wine and desserts while you watch the fireworks. So
Wow.
it's a big difference from like sitting on the curb with a lollipop and a
Yeah.
bag of popcorn with a bunch of little kids fighting the crowds to watch
Yeah. Yeah.
fireworks. So
Okay.
yeah, so
Cool.
that's what I'm doing for the next week. And I'm telling you, I'm in a good place. Company's in a good place. Accounts are in a good place. I'm in a
Good.
good place. And I am looking forward to having 6 or 7 days of solid relaxation.
Awesome,
Looking
man.
forward
Well,
to it.
enjoy your time off.
that probably sounds like a lot of people's worst nightmare, but man, I love it.
Doesn't sound like something I'd want to do, but if it
Don't get
works
me
for
wrong.
you,
Like
that's
my wife
great.
and I are going to Sedona, Arizona in a couple weeks, and we're going to have a couple days, just the two of us, massages and reading and good
Some of that music
views
you
and
were talking about.
some of that music I'm talking about for sure. So like I like my vacations to come in a lot of different ways, but this is a fun group to hang out with, and I can't wait to spend the week with them. So
Cool.
it's good stuff. Yeah,
All right, man. Well, thanks. Have a good time.
awesome. You got it, man. See you, Dave.
See you.
Talk to you next time.
All
Bye.
right.